New Year with a Billionaire. By Ellie Hall. Copyright 2018 Ellie Hall. All rights reserved. Chapter 1. Isabella. Isabella spun in the full-length mirror. The gems and sequins on her dress sparkled. Her blonde hair cascaded down her back in loose curls. She gave her reflection an air kiss, excited for the New Year's Eve party. Only, she wasn't leaving her Upper East Side apartment. The festivities were coming to her. She'd been planning for months and everything was going to be perfect: the decor, the guest list, the food and drink. Her phone beeped with a text. It was from her friend Maya. "Sorry, can't make it. Bounty is sick with a tummy bug." Isabella sighed. So many of her friends were getting married, settling down, and having children, with names like Bounty, Clementine, and Daisy. Her mother would never let her get away with that. Poor Selena, her long-haired cat, slinked across the vanity. "Well, at least if I become an old cat lady, you'll keep me company." The cat bumped her hand, requesting a scratch behind the ears. Poor Selena purred. "But I can't pick you up because I'm wearing a gown." With one last pet on the cat's head, Isabella checked herself in the mirror again. It wasn't that she was vain, but wanted to look her very best in case she met anyone who'd become that special someone. If not, her mother was going to try to marry her off to the first eligible bachelor. Isabella believed in true love, but love of any sort had been in short supply lately. Her phone beeped again. She grabbed it and before looking at the incoming message she said, "Poor Selena, be a good girl and stay in here tonight. I don't want you to escape." She closed the door behind her. "Look at me, I'm talking to my cat. This can't end well." Her heels clicked on the wood floor as she strode down the hall to the living room. The text was from her hairstylist. He cancelled, but he was nosy, always prodding her for gossip, so she didn't count it as a huge loss. As she adjusted a few of the silver, black, and gold decorations along the mantel and shelves, her phone beeped yet again. Someone else flaked out. While she was replying, she got another text from someone concerned about the weather. She felt like typing, "This is New York City. You can walk." But she came up with a more polite response. When her phone beeped for the 5th time, it occurred to her that they might be ditching her party for another, better one. The name Everly Corbett crashed into her mind. She swiped to her social and scrolled until she found her ex-friend's page. There wasn't anything new since the day before when Everly had posted a selfie. Figured. Isabella surveyed the room. The banners, balloons, streamers, and lighting were festive, but tasteful, classy. Nevertheless, she felt the pressure to have the biggest and best party because Everly's were always so popular. They'd been friends in high school, but all that had changed over time. Everly won the Christmas of that year, and by one, she'd sent out the invites in July. There was no way Isabella could compete with that. And she had to admit the fete was phenomenal with ice sculptures, a hot chocolate fountain, and swag bags filled to the brim. It was a lot to keep up with, and she'd sunk all her savings into this event so she could remain relevant in their circle. Sometimes she wondered if it even mattered, but it was New Year's Eve. Perhaps her resolution would be to find some new friends, ones who didn't care about parties and guest lists and gossip. Out with the old and all that. But she already felt lonely much of the time. Isabella gazed out the 5th-floor window at the evening sky. The clouds floating above the buildings seemed to glow. Yup, it was going to snow. At least she could count on Clara. She turned back to her phone to kill time before the caterers arrived and found her friend's feed. Clara wasn't like the others. They'd met at the shelter where Isabella had adopted poor Selena and hit it off. Clara was refreshingly funny, honest, and not caught up in the society circle Isabella had grown up in. As she scrolled through her friend's feed, Isabella's mouth fell open. She was in London with Elle Ryder, the famous rock star. How did she miss that headline? She was about to call because this news was worthy of a voice-to-voice chat, but she realized it was already New Year's Day there, well, early morning. Too early. She tossed the phone next to her on the couch only to have it ring. Her mother's image filled the screen. At least it wasn't another text from someone canceling. Angela Augustino's voice trilled through the speaker. Isabella, I have the best surprise. We're going to brunch tomorrow with the perfect Italian boy. Her mother gushed about how he was wealthy, established, and handsome before Isabella could get a word in. I was planning on sleeping in tomorrow morning. Nonsense. This is a wonderful opportunity. Remember, you're 28. The clock is ticking. I'd already had you when I was your age. Her mother continued with her well-versed, pressure-filled speech to marry off her daughter. Isabella had done so much in her career in marketing, though she had to admit she wasn't really looking forward to going back to work the day after next. She'd traveled extensively and looked great on paper with a sizable roster of successes. Wasn't that enough? Her mother made her feel like a failure or like she was missing something. The hard truth was, they were both missing Pietro Agostino, Isabella's dad. This was their first holiday season without him. Snow began to fall. There was a view of the glowing New Year's ball in Times Square through the window. Well, the corner of the ball, sort of. The lights from Christmas still shone and were a bit magical. Her mother's voice floated back to her. I just want you to find the one. Right. The one. However, Isabella had already found him and Everly took him from her too. Isabella hurried her mother off the phone because she had to call the caterer. If they didn't come soon, there wouldn't be food. Okay, but promise you'll meet us for brunch. The doorbell rang. Okay, promise got to go. Hope flared inside. Someone had braved the coming storm. Isabella swung the door open. Her eyes widened and her mouth fell open. A tall, dark, and handsome man stood on the other side. Chapter 2. Mateo. Isabella was dazzling in a sparkly gown with her hair loose and her lips painted red. Mateo had seen her often enough with her hair in a bun on top of her head, her cheeks pink, and in jeans and a t-shirt. He thought she was beautiful then, but they were still teenagers. In the years that had elapsed since he'd last seen her in person, she'd blossomed into a radiant woman. He shifted on his feet, suddenly 18 all over again, tongue-tied and awkward. She closed her mouth, and he wondered if she recognized him. He'd been lauded the next David Beckham and had the soccer skills and swagger to prove it. Where David had light hair, Mateo's was dark. His jaw was strong, and since he hadn't had a chance to shave since arriving from London, it filled in with stubble. He brushed his cheek, suddenly shy in her presence. A beat passed and the soft strains of big band party music filtered from the apartment, the kind always playing in her family's restaurant. Isabella, Mateo said, moving to pull her into a hug. She stepped back and angled the door between them like a shield. His eyebrows bunched together. He thought she'd be delighted to see him, it had been so long. In fact, he hadn't stopped at his mother's yet and still toted his luggage. It was just a bag, he learned to travel light after years with the team. He shifted it to his other hand. What are you doing here? Isabella asked. I'm sorry. I know I wasn't invited. Everly told me you were having a party. I thought it would be okay. Isabella shook her head. Everly did not say that. She's having a party of her own. She's been poaching my guests. Isabella glanced at her phone. Mateo scratched his jaw. Everly Corbett? She's in St. Martin. Isabella stepped back. Then why did you come here to see her if she's not here? Her tone was sharp. His eyes floated to hers, but she looked away, leaving him more confused than before. No, I came here to see you. It's been years. He'd stayed away from the city, his father, and by extension her, but he hadn't meant for so much time to pass. Then how did you know I was having a party and she wasn't? She crossed her arms in front of her chest. She and I have kept in touch. I thought you were friends. She told me not to miss your party. He peered behind her at the festive decorations. Can I come in? She smoothed her hands down her gown, seemingly flustered. Mateo glanced down at his casual outfit of a thin V-neck sweater and jeans, not party attire, but the Isabella he knew wasn't obsessed with style and keeping up appearances compared to girls like Everly, at least he didn't think so. Nevertheless, she stepped aside. Mateo set down his luggage, took off his scarf, and rubbed his hands together. Brisk out there. I hear a storm is coming. It's been cold in London too. She didn't reply. Looks like I'm the first guest. And only. Everyone is canceling. She clicked off her phone and took his coat. Their hands brushed. His heart stuttered as though reminded of something buried deep inside, a time capsule of sorts. Something he hadn't let himself think about in 10 long years. Would you like a drink? She asked. Water, please. I just came from the airport. She blinked with surprise. You came here first? In fact, he couldn't wait to see her. As soon as he booked the ticket, he'd anticipated the visit. Mateo pointed at his luggage. Long flight. Her mouth opened and closed as though remembering something. I'm so sorry for your loss. I just remembered. My mother mentioned it, insisting I attend the funeral next weekend. He snorted. Ironic, my mother said the same thing. She stepped closer and extended her hand before changing her mind and pulling it away. I guess it's hard to celebrate at a time like this. Again, I'm so sorry. Mateo shook his head. My father wasn't a very nice man. We both know that. Some people said Lorenzo Ciprielli was a business genius. Others marveled at his ability to level his competition and rise to the top of the luxury resort world from a fledgling corporation Mateo's grandfather had started in Europe. The Ciprielli name was attached to hotels, restaurants, clubs, and numerous pieces of valuable real estate. The man was shrewd, underhanded, and didn't think much of the people he crushed along the way, including his son. Yeah, but he was your father, Isabella said. The corner of her lips dipped with sadness. A vague memory washed over him. She'd also lost her father, almost a year ago. It was the night of the World Cup and he'd never truly acknowledged it, caught up as he was in the team's win, didn't want to face it, he supposed. I'm sorry. I forgot. Isabella looked toward the window. If only he'd been able to see you win. The pain of her loss was visible, and he reached for her, wanting to absorb some of it, but she stepped toward the kitchen. You've missed a lot since you've been gone, Mateo. The words sounded bitter-sweet. Bitter because she was right and part of him regretted it, and sweet because the way she said his name was like finally arriving home to a place where he truly belonged. How's Mrs. Agostino? He asked. My mother holds fast to her position in society, as she calls it, with a death grip. You know, lunch with the ladies, soirees, invitations to classy social events. Mateo shrugged. She's the person who created that society. Remember that dinner with the president and first lady? She loved the meatballs. Mateo smiled. Your mom reigned queen. Isabella clicked her tongue. What she doesn't realize is we were only a part of society because of the restaurant. Wait, is the restaurant closed? I could have sworn I saw, he'd passed it in the car on the way over and the sign was lit, bringing back his fondest memories. It's still there. She hired a manager. Or technically I did. Mateo gazed toward the kitchen, suddenly starving at the mention of the restaurant. The carpaccio, the fettuccine, the parmigiana. He smacked his lips. Her eyes widened and for a moment, she looked just as hungry as he felt, but her face slipped back into sadness. You must miss him. But maybe while I'm here we could meet for dinner. Go over there together, for old time's sake. Her eyes welled with tears and she tucked her head, gazing at her hands. He stepped closer and gently gripped her arms. Isabella, I'm sorry. Did I say something wrong? Chapter 3. Isabella. Isabella didn't mean to cry, but tears over her father were the kind that refused to dry up or disappear. She hadn't been to the family restaurant since she witnessed him clutch his chest and collapse on the kitchen's black and white tiled floor. He'd missed watching Matteo score the winning goal that brought his team the win for the World Cup. Isabella had too as she scrambled to save his life. She'd failed and hadn't stepped foot in the building since. She hadn't told anyone she couldn't go because she was Italian and supposed to be strong for her family. She explained to her mother that she had to hold off on helping at the restaurant for a while, busy with her job. Of course, she'd always had her own job, but up until her father's passing, she'd spent every weekend and many weeknights helping at the family restaurant. Her mother worked the front of the house and Isabella didn't think she possessed the same level of charm and patience to interact with the customers and ensure everything was perfect during their visit. The truth was, she'd preferred the cozy kitchen with its messes and splatters, her father singing or swearing in Italian, and the nibbles she helped herself to because Il Bacio was known for having the most delicious food in New York City. Despite her parents' humble beginnings, they'd landed at the epicenter of Manhattan society. They'd worked hard all their lives, but also received the side benefits of the wealthy and well-known clientele and made among them some of their best friends who'd become like family. A story her father loved to tell, to keep her humble and remind her where she came from. She'd literally come from the hospital 7 blocks over, but her parents moved to the US when they were in their early 20s, newly in love and with stars in their eyes. Her father's cooking combined with her mother's charm won them loyal customers for over 2 decades. Then everything changed. So suddenly. Angela, Isabella's mother, was never the same. She missed her husband and best friend, Isabella knew that, but it was also as if she was trying to live vicariously through her daughter. Isabella just wished she could find her own true amore as they had so many years ago. Then again, Isabella was also different after that fateful day that brought the family to the same hospital where she'd been born, but under tragic circumstances. Mateo's voice filtered to her. Isabella. I'm sorry. I don't know what I said. He cleared his throat. Also, your phone keeps beeping. She wiped her eyes and checked. Another guest can't make it, she muttered. Isabella risked a glance at Mateo. He'd changed over the years, became more ruggedly handsome, and had filled out since they were teens and last saw each other. He had the body of an athlete, broad shoulders and muscles in all the right places. Isabella bit her lip. She'd squished her feelings for him into a tiny box and had stored it far out of reach. She wouldn't let herself be hurt again. While her mother tried to match her with every single guy in the city with the semblance of an Italian last name, she wanted what her parents had. True love. She thought she'd had the one she wanted. They'd been best friends and hatched plans to explore the old country together. They dreamed under starry skies and shared bowls of pasta. She thought it was forever. She never expected things to change. But he chose Everly over her. She still saw him at school, and of course at the restaurant, but their relationship had shifted. She felt abandoned when her 2 friends started dating. Then he left to play soccer. Then likely, to the arms of countless women who were attracted to his status and wealth, if the rumors were true. She didn't expect to see him again, or at least avoided the prospect because of the way it made her feel, like she didn't quite make the cut. Everly always bested her. He was the one. Or so she'd thought. And he was standing right in her kitchen. She couldn't believe it. Couldn't fathom or process what brought him back there on New Year's Eve of all nights. She was annoyed, irritated, but attracted too. She couldn't deny her awareness of him, the way he moved, his dark eyes, the fullness of his lips, and the angles of his jaw. Isabella shook her head, feeling 16 all over again. More texts came in and then a call. She listened, argued, and then hung up. The caterer cancelled because of the weather. I guess there's sleet in the forecast. That means no food. If Isabella learned anything from her parents while growing up, there always had to be food and lots of it. I can help. I've been traveling and could go for a warm, home-cooked meal. Surely we can come up with something, Mateo offered. He opened the nearest cabinet and then another, as familiar with her space as he had been when they were younger. Her mother always told him to make himself at home. Although this was a different home and they were different, the rules no longer applied. Isabella rushed into the kitchen to stop him, but wasn't quick enough in her heels on the uneven tile. She collided into him and their arms tangled as she tried to barricade the cabinet doors, but it was too late. His expression moved from surprise to a smirk. Why can't I look? However, she sensed he already knew. She swallowed, feeling foolish as a blush rose to her cheeks. There was heat elsewhere too, where their arms brushed, the spot on her shoulder where she'd pressed against him, and where their knees bumped as she tried to close the cabinet door. His smile was flirtatious now, the teasing one she remembered all too well. He leaned against the counter. Your mother would be ashamed. What self-respecting Italian woman doesn't have a kitchen full of food? It doesn't look like anyone is coming anyway. Mateo pouted, mock-insulted. Anyone? Aren't I someone? Silence floated between them like the snowflakes through the window, but she couldn't keep her eyes off him for long. He was just as she remembered, but better, and that was something she didn't want to admit. But he chose Everly over her. He'd hurt her. She had to forget about him. Her lips turned down. I'm the one who should be upset, he said. Isabella snapped to attention. Who said I was upset? Mateo's gaze floated over her and the warmth that all but dissipated flared up. He had the ability to make her feel flustered, out of sorts, and schoolgirl giddy. When he didn't answer, she asked, why should you be upset? I'll admit that I've been gone too long and missed too much, but I didn't come all this way to see the girl whose smile has carried me through every day of the last 10 years to see her frown. Chapter 4. Mateo. As if she couldn't help herself, Isabella smiled. That's the one, he crowed. The one I've been waiting for. He stepped in front of her, ready to embrace her in the kind of hug that was familiar when they were younger. The Augustinos were a huggy kind of family, something Mateo always appreciated in contrast to his family's relative distance. But just as quickly as her smile appeared, it dissolved. Her lips formed a line. He didn't understand it and wondered if he did something wrong, but figured he'd find safe conversation ground. So, I take it you and Everly aren't friends? She scowled. Nope, not safe, but familiar and apparently dangerous. Mateo exhaled. Is that a no? More like rivals. But your mother and she were always rivals. On the surface and in public, they appeared to be friends, but there were late-night catfights in the alley outside the restaurant that scared the actual cats away. Mateo's forehead furrowed at the vision. He fought a chuckle because he knew she was joking. Mostly. I had no idea. Of course not. Sophia Corbett and Angela Augustino were skilled at keeping up appearances. It must run in the family. He knew the dig was at Everly. Where Isabella was deep like a sauce left to simmer and develop flavor, Everly was like, well, superficial. So you and Everly. I think the term to describe us is frenemies. Mateo laughed. Isabella did not. What about that time when she was in the school play, had borrowed your father's chef's hat, and it fell over her eyes? This memory brought a subtle grin to Isabella's lips. He was hungry for more of her smile, laughter, her Or when I had to present my findings on the rate of decomposition of common foods for the science fair. Remember you and your dad stayed up half the night helping me fix it? The frown was back. It was like a shot in the arm. He wasn't sure why she was the first and only person he wanted to see upon his return. However, for the last weeks, heck the last years, in little stolen moments when he was alone, her image, laugh, and her smile would float in his mind and remain stuck there for days. Yet she wasn't the happy girl he remembered. Something was missing. She cleared her throat. I still owe you that water. Still or sparkling? Warmth washed over him. It was a simple question, reminiscent of evenings spent at her family's restaurant. He bussed tables at Isabella, not because he needed the money, but he enjoyed the companionship, the camaraderie, and of course the food. Isabella usually helped her dad in the kitchen. On rare occasions, her mother insisted she host or wait tables, but he knew her heart was in the back with the pots and pans, the sauces and sautéing. Mateo had the odd thought that his heart was with her. She held a glass aloft, waiting for his answer. He shook the thought out of his head. Oh, yeah, sparkling, please. How's your mom? She asked as she led them to the living room. A Happy New Year banner hung across the mantel, and shiny silver and gold decorations covered the other surfaces. He leaned against it, careful not to disturb the garland. Do you mean wife number one in a long list? He chuckled, because it was easier than feeling the sting. There were so many reasons he stayed away. But there were two that should have kept him close, or at least brought him back to visit. I'll see my mother tomorrow. She wasn't at the Christmas bash at Everly's. Please tell her I say hello and send my condolences. I will. He drew a slow breath. I'm easing back into this. You know? He hadn't told anyone about what he learned after his father passed. He wanted nothing to do with it, yet felt the urge to tell Isabella. She'd understand. I got everything, Mateo blurted. Isabella tilted her head as though she didn't hear him correctly, or perhaps she did and wasn't sure what he meant. I got the inheritance. The Ciprielli Empire. Everything. He swallowed hard because he hadn't allowed himself to think too hard about what this meant. This time her arm landed on his. She knew about everything that had gone on between him and his father, at least back when they were younger. The truth was, he and his father had hardly spoken in the decade since. What about your father's other wives? Wife number 2 passed away. He counted on his fingers. 3 has already threatened my life if I don't give her half. He chuckled. The lawyers are on top of it. She was always rather hot-headed. Asked me to marry her. Well, her assistant did. I told her I'm happily single. Well, not happily, he thought as his gaze drifted to Isabella. Her eyebrows lifted. He nodded. I couldn't make this up. Wife number 5 is missing in action. I'm not sure she knows my father died. Or cares. Last I heard, she married some other billionaire. And your mom? She doesn't want anything to do with the money. If she had her way, I'd settle down, have a family, eat more, and build her a mother-in-law cottage on my villa in Tuscany. Mateo laughed. Do you have a villa in Tuscany? They'd fantasized about traveling the Italian countryside. He shook his head. No, but it didn't sound like a bad idea if it were with the right person. The one person he couldn't stop thinking about all these years. His eyes swept hers and held. She fidgeted with the hem of her sleeve. She was adorable, beautiful, and she didn't even realize it. He sat down next to her on the couch. So tell me what you've been doing. She shrugged, suddenly distant. He asked her a few more questions, trying to get her to open up, but she wouldn't budge. He wanted to help her feel at ease, to warm the room, and to close the space between them. Instead, Mateo started talking about his soccer career and travels when the lights blinked out. Chapter 5. Isabella. Isabella startled and then shrieked, instinctively shifting closer to Mateo. She gripped his arm. His hand closed around hers. It was strong, yet gentle. Firm and assuring. She lamented how her party had gone from something she anticipated for months to an utter failure. But right then, her concern was heat, electricity, and running water, because if the weather was any indication, it was downright cold out and would only get worse. However, Mateo repeatedly distracted her with his clean, manly, and minty scent. She'd have closed her eyes and breathed deep, allowing herself a moment to relax in his presence, but it was already dark and the sharp pings of the icy rain on the window reminded her of the predicament she was in. "What do we do?" she asked softly in the darkness. Mateo's stomach grumbled. "Eat," he asked. She couldn't help it, but she laughed. Then tears edged their way in at a memory of her father, because she could no longer hear him give his answer to everything. Mangiare. Eat. From the dim light through the window, Mateo's lips pressed together. "I didn't mean to upset you. It's just, a warm meal," was Mr. Augustino's answer to everything. His voice faded. "It's hard," she admitted. "It's hard without him. After you left, he was my best friend." He squeezed her hand, and that tightening seemed to loosen something inside of her. She suddenly felt braver, less alone. "Remember that camping trip we went on?" Mateo asked. "My mother brought actual china. Did she think we were going to have a place to wash dishes? Your father's food was too good for paper plates." Isabella snorted a laugh. "I suppose you're right." Then it started raining. The tent half collapsed. A bear got into the trash. We're not country mice, that's for sure. My father's solution was to boil water for pasta. For breakfast. Mateo laughed. Isabella joined him as though dusting off the rust. "If you fell off your bike," she asked, using a hypothetical scenario. "My dad's answer?" "Eat." "Got a bad grade on a test?" "Mangiare," she said in Italian. "Got into a disagreement with a friend?" "Eat." "Missed a goal?" "Mangiare." She shifted and then said, "The boy you had a crush on for years ditched you for someone else?" They both went still, silent. Because Mateo choosing Everly over her was one thing her father's cooking didn't solve. And it would never fix anything again because he was gone. She slid her hand from Mateo's. But they were still seated close together and his thigh pressed against hers, stamping her with warmth, with the desire not to move. His stomach growled again. And hers rumbled in answer. "Hungry?" Isabella asked. "I'm sorry. We could go foraging." "I thought you said we weren't country mice." "I might have a protein bar in my gym bag. Actually, I have a bag of nuts from the flight." She wished she knew what he was thinking or had the courage to say what was on her mind, that she was glad to see him again, despite the memories and ache that came with his return. For the first time, she felt connected and less alone, but knew it wouldn't last long. He slapped his hand on his pants. "Since we're both hungry, I have an idea. It's a little crazy. Tell me more. Let's have it be a surprise." "Do you mean for us to go out?" She pointed to the window where the sleet continued to batter the window. "Bundle up. It looks cold. But hurry in case the power goes out elsewhere." Isabella didn't want to leave him waiting, so she grabbed a thick pair of socks, tugged them over her stockings, found her warmest coat, and winter gear. The sidewalk was slippery, but after they'd walked a few blocks, the icy rain slowed and the flakes became thicker and heavier. While they waited for a plow to pass, Isabella bounced on her toes to keep warm. "You look like a polar bear." Mateo's eyes crinkled. "When the weather gets like this, my fashion sensibility goes out the window. But I think I'm as hungry as one." They trudged through the snow for a few more blocks. Isabella concentrated on not falling on the slick sidewalk, but when she stepped off the curb at a crossing, an icy patch caused her to slip. Her arms windmilled, and she reached out for Mateo. He helped steady her, and their eyes met. "Thank you." Her breath clouded in the cold. Mateo held out his elbow for her to hold on to properly, and they continued around the corner, arms linked. She felt supported, and despite the frigid temperature, he warmed her in a way only he could. Sure, she'd dated, but it was never the same fullness she experienced with him. "Here we are," he said grandly, drawing her from her thoughts. When she looked up at the glowing letters on the familiar sign, she froze. Chapter 6. Mateo. Isabella's arm fell away and she staggered. She shook her head. He didn't quite hear what she said as a plow went by, clattering against the ice and cement. They probably closed up early due to the weather. Remember during that double storm when we were all stuck at the restaurant overnight? Billy slept on the sacks of semolina your uncle used to make the pasta. Luigi got drunk on grappa. Oh, and, as he spoke, he'd started to cross the street to the entrance just to be sure no one was locked inside, waiting out the weather, when he realized Isabella was no longer beside him. In her white puffer coat, hat, and mittens, she stood like an icicle on the sidewalk. He rushed back. "Memories?" he asked softly, realizing this too might be hard for her. She nodded. "Me too, in a way." He hadn't grown up there like she had, but he'd matured in a different way while in the kitchen and dining room, and gotten the nerve to stand up to his father. The thick snow collected on their shoulders as another minute passed. "Your dad was always there to listen. He was a good man. The best." "It was so sudden," Isabella whispered. Her eyes shone in the light from the sign. A tear drifted down her cheek and he wiped it with his thumb before it froze. She sniffled and lifted her eyes to his. "My biggest regret was that I didn't get to say goodbye." He paused. "To your father and to you." She didn't say anything as she stared at the restaurant building. He stepped closer, wanting to wrap his arms around her, and thaw the icy hold that gripped her heart. That kept her at a distance. So he did. He hugged her close, the promise of his arms to support her if she needed to let out more of her sadness and a hand to guide her if she wanted to go inside. "I'd like to have said goodbye too. When I found out you made the league, I left. I couldn't bear it. I went to your apartment. Your mom said you'd gone away for the weekend." She pulled back and nodded. "Morocco." "Really?" "Because I was on my way to London, I could've." Her smile was tentative, moving slowly across her lips. "I was in my room watching Casablanca." Mateo laughed lightly. They'd watched the old black and white film so many times they'd practically memorized every line. "I didn't get to say goodbye to my dad either. The last thing he said was, 'Isabella, will you toss me that head of garlic?' Then he collapsed. It all happened so quickly. I rushed to help, but he was gone in moments." Mateo tightened his hold around her. "I miss him." She sniffled and then looked up, meeting Mateo's eyes again. "I missed you. Thank you for coming back. I only wish I'd done it sooner. Will you forgive me?" She nodded and straightened, staring at the familiar building across the street. "It's snowing, we're both cold and hungry, the only solution I can think of is mangiare." He extended his hand for hers. "He taught me how to make il bacio. I remember it was your favorite sauce." He started to describe it, hoping to entice her. She hesitated. "Come on. We'll do it together." He squeezed her hand. "It might help you to say goodbye. Or hello. Ciao. It means both." At this, the corners of her lips finally lifted into the smile he treasured. "Do you have a key?" he asked. The glow of the kitchen appliances provided dim light as Isabella instinctively reached for the wall switch to turn on the bright overhead lights. They both looked around for a long minute. "Everything looks the same except one thing," she said, her voice low, almost reverent. "What's that?" "It's missing il bacio." "The sauce?" he asked, referring to the famous menu item, what he always thought was the namesake of the restaurant, because the minute you tasted it you wanted to kiss the chef. She didn't answer. She drew her hand along the length of the prep station, ran her finger along the rim of a copper pan hanging overhead, and then stopped in front of her father's chopping block. "I haven't been here since the day he died. On the occasions I have business at the restaurant, I send my assistant. I told my mother it's because I'm busy, but I couldn't bear to set a foot inside despite the fact that my mother and I are officially co-owners." "I didn't realize?" Isabella shrugged. "I'm glad we came tonight because from the sounds of my mother's complaining, it won't be around for much longer. We'd kept it in the family with distant cousins for the most part. But it lacks what my father called il bacio, the kiss." "Not the sauce?" "It's that special something that brought the place alive for so many years. Some said it was my father's cooking. Others claimed it was my mom's front-of-house charm." "It is a special place," Mateo said. "Always has been. Always will, right?" She shrugged. "It's missing the two of them working together." The sauce was delicious, but il bacio, the kiss, was very real. For 26 years, after they'd lock up they'd exchange a kiss as they pulled the blind down on the door and settle in for their hard-earned late-night meal before getting up the next day and doing it all over again. "Your father used to tell me he was the luckiest man alive to have met your mother." Isabella could practically hear Pietro saying the words. It was something he'd remind anyone who'd listen as often as possible. She said luck had nothing to do with it. They'd met at a gelato stand in Rome. He'd worked in a hotel restaurant and she was going to night school. They committed to each other, were faithful, worked hard, and were best friends. "I always wondered how they met. But I do know what we're missing right now, the meal. We need to warm this place up, sauté some garlic and get the sauce simmering." Mateo disappeared into the walk-in refrigerator and emerged with an armload of ingredients. "You sit back and let me do the work." Isabella had taken off her jacket. She looked elegant in her sparkling gown against the backdrop of the old-world kitchen. He couldn't help but glance back over his shoulder at her as he heated olive oil in the saucepan, and added the essentials: cream, garlic, basil, oregano, rosemary, a shake of this, a dash of that. When the pasta was al dente, he dipped his pinky into the sauce. He turned to Isabella as he tasted it. "Bellissima." His flirtatious smile grew as he dished up their dinner because what he said was true, the sauce was delicious, but she was gorgeous. Isabella had prepared a table in the front, spread with a fresh tablecloth and 2 glasses filled with sparkling water. A single candle flickered in the middle. Classic Italian music played softly in the background. They both sat down. Their eyes met. He clinked his glass against hers. "Ciao, Bella." Her expression softened when he used her old nickname. "To old friends and new beginnings." "I like that. It is New Year's Eve, after all. I'm glad you surprised me by showing up on my doorstep. I'm glad you came out with me on a date." "Is this a date?" "I don't recall you asking me." She tossed her hair over her shoulder. "It has all the makings of a date." He gestured at their surroundings. "But I suppose I should have asked you." She fluttered her lashes. Mateo bit his lip. "Isabella, would you like to join me for dinner?" At your restaurant?" She sat up tall. "I'd be delighted. But how many meals have we shared at these tables?" "Countless." He smiled, glad their official first date was at Il Bacio. "But I suppose none of those meals were quite like this," Isabella said. "And I've never cooked for you." Now, let me know what you think of the sauce. Mangiare. Isabella took a bite and leaped from the table. Her hand clutched her chest and her wooden chair clattered onto the floor behind her. Chapter 7. Isabella. Mateo got up from the table and rushed to Isabella's side. Are you okay? Are you choking? Does it taste bad? I can make you something else. Her world turned upside down and inside out. She recognized the familiar flavors instantly, and it was as if she was famished and hadn't eaten in ages. She grabbed her fork and took another bite, a bigger one. So I take it you like it, Mateo asked with a questioning tone. She closed her eyes and chewed. The balance of tomato to garlic, basil, and, did she detect a hint of lemon? Rosemary? She couldn't be sure. She'd watched Mateo cook. She'd admired the man she hadn't seen since he was bussing dirty dishes, not dirtying the dishes. He moved confidently in the kitchen like he'd been cooking for years. Apparently, he had been. She blinked open her eyes, wanting to plant a bacio on his lips. Mateo righted the fallen chair. So is it okay? The sauce. You made the sauce. The famous sauce. The one we haven't been able to replicate. Isabella dropped into her seat. Yeah. The sauce. Your father's recipe. He taught me. Always said he wanted me to be strong for the field. He worried I wouldn't eat enough when on the road. He believed I'd play pro soccer even when my father didn't. Mateo smirked and leaned in as if sharing a secret. He also suggested I make it for the team, but it would be even better for me to cook for my future wife, to impress her. Mateo sat back down and took a bite. Isabella felt her cheeks heat. That sounded exactly like something Pietro would say. He was quite the romantic. He cooked this dish for my mother, and that's when they fell in love. It's why they decided to move to the US and open a restaurant. Is that why they called it Il Bacio? Because she did indeed kiss the cook. Isabella nodded and took another mouthful. In addition to the usual ingredients, I detect a hint of something spicy, lemon. He made me promise never to share the recipe with anyone until I have a son. I wish he was still here. She gazed toward the kitchen. He was like a father to me in many ways. More so than my own. My father disapproved of my choices, especially going into sports instead of the family business. You never struck me as the corporate type. I'm surprised he left everything to you. Actually, my grandfather did. According to our lawyers, they held everything in a trust for me. My father never owned a cent of Ciprielli Enterprises. It's been yours all along? Mateo clicked his tongue. I suppose that's why he resented me, why he was upset when I didn't go to college and study business. He knew my legacy. Why didn't he just tell you? Mateo shrugged. I'm not sure I'll ever know. It feels like a burden though. I'm not prepared or equipped to. He stopped talking and looked down at his plate. Isabella glanced around the familiar dining room. The table arrangement was as it always had been. The exposed brick wall on one side lent a rustic feel, while the updated entryway and lighting had a more modern aesthetic. The old and new coming together. It's not quite the same as heading a billion-dollar company, but I didn't think I could handle running this restaurant. But now that I'm finally back, I have this odd feeling that it missed me. That it needs me. Mateo tilted his head as though carefully considering her words. They each took a few bites, savoring the flavors of the meal. You know, if anything, my mother wants the opposite for me than your father did for you. I almost think she's glad I'm not here night after night. She wants me to be a good Italian girl. Cook. Clean. Keep the home. Don't get me wrong, she's worked hard. But mostly I think she wants to be a grandmother. Her irritation at the pressure her mother had put on her dissipated because she finally understood Angela Agostino just wanted family, what both her parents always told her was the most important thing. Her father said family isn't just whom we're born to, but the people we invite into our lives. What do you want? Matteo asked her. She took another bite of pasta as though thinking about it. She moaned at how delicious it was. More of this. I definitely want more of this, Matteo. But she also knew she wanted him. She'd never gotten over him. She swallowed hard and took a long sip of water to cool off, because if it hadn't happened back, then it wasn't about to now. I'm surprised to hear you use my full name. Most people called me Matt. But I will gladly make this for you anytime, Bella. Hearing him use the nickname he'd started when they were teens again stirred something inside her. Something she wasn't sure she was ready for, so she shifted back to a practical if not emotional topic. I'd seen my father make the sauce countless times. I never paid attention because I thought he'd always be around. She chewed slowly, trying to figure out what else was in the recipe. My lips are sealed. After he passed, my mother tried to find it written somewhere. She never could. She didn't know what was in it because she never came back here, always tending to the front of the house. I didn't know I knew the secret sauce recipe, Mateo said. I guess you'll have to keep me around for a while. He pushed his empty plate to the side and leaned on his elbows. He had no idea how badly she wanted that to be true. Then, fitting with her passionate nature, Isabella burst into laughter and tears at the same time. She felt relieved and excited and like she'd found a thread from the past that somehow brought her father back, and an old friend in Mateo. Should I ask why you're crying and laughing at the same time again? He asked. She reached across the table and gripped his hands. I'm laughing and crying, she corrected. Before I was crying and laughing. Is there a difference? She nodded. The second one is the emotion to pay attention to. In this case, happy tears. I'm Italian, we're passionate people. His eyes smoldered in the candlelight. Yes, I suppose we are. She swallowed hard. Do you know what this means? We'll be going on more dates? Eating more pasta? His tone was buoyant. It means I can save the restaurant. Chapter 8. Mateo. Mateo scratched his jaw. Does the restaurant need saving? Her eyes filled with hope. Yes. Sales are fine. Weekend reservations fill up fast. But something has been missing all this time. She paused in thought. I can save the restaurant. It's what my father would have wanted. She drew her hands into her chest and then spread them wide around Mateo. Without thinking, he hugged her back, picked her up off her feet, and spun her around. The song playing softly in the background was slow, romantic, and he envisioned them dancing. His hand slid down her back. He was going to ask, but felt silly. Then their eyes met, sending a rush of tingling warmth from where he held her in his arms, into his chest, and beyond. It was a full-body feeling. Her cheeks were rosy and her lips so soft. He inclined his head. Her eyes drifted to his lips and her chin lifted. They'd never been this close before, except maybe the time she fell off a ladder while hanging up Christmas decorations years ago. He caught her, but they'd both dropped into a heap on the floor. Then the moment turned into relieved laughter when they were sure neither of them broke any bones. This was different though. Intense. Powerful. Adoring. The room was warm. The lighting dim. The song. The song changed with a loud instrumental introduction into the classic Amore, starting with the line, "When the moon hit your eye like a big pizza pie." Like before, they dissolved into laughter. But this time it was less from relief and more disappointment. Perhaps. He hoped. They returned to the table and cleared it. While they cleaned the dishes and kitchen, Mateo couldn't help but think of how little space there had been between them moments before. How close he was. It was what he wanted, and he didn't understand why he couldn't have it. Why she seemed hesitant and kept him, almost, at arm's length. Then his phone beeped with a text. It was from Everly. She was wearing a bikini in the tropics and her message said, "This is what you're missing." Just then, Isabella put a utensil in the sink and it would have been a shock had the image not drawn her attention. She didn't say anything but her posture changed as she walked away. She became stiffer, more reserved. Now he was back at arm's length. That's when he realized what had come between them, or rather whom. And he'd lost interest in her years ago if it had ever existed in the first place. Mateo pocketed the phone and finished rinsing the saucepan. After he wiped his hands, he leaned against the counter. He wasn't sure how to bring the subject up, but it was in that very kitchen where he got the courage to do other big things in his life. He said a little prayer, asking for the right words. If I could turn back time to that summer day I came rushing in here, sweaty and excited, announcing I'd made the league and had a future playing soccer, I would. Isabella folded the towel she held and asked, "Do you mean not have played? You worked so hard. You're so good, Anne." "No, I mean I would have come here first. I told Everly before I came to see you. If I could turn back the hands of time even farther, to when we were juniors in high school. I would. Yeah, if I recall, your grades weren't spectacular. No, I mean to when I asked Everly to prom. Originally, I was going to ask you, but Everly said you were hoping Josh Alvarez would ask you. Since I always saw you guys chatting in class. We sat next to each other because Mrs. Vincent put us in alphabetical order." He smelled like a squirrel. Mateo wrinkled his nose. "How do you know what a squirrel smells like?" Isabella shrugged. "Well, he looked like a squirrel, so I figured he smelled like one too. Kinda gamey." "That's gross. But what I'm trying to say is Everly told me you didn't like me that way. You know, enough to go to prom with me. I realize now I should have just talked to you. Just the same way he should have talked to his father about their differences before it was too late. Maybe it wasn't too late with Isabella. I'd like to go back." "We can't go back, Mateo." "No?" He understood her reservations, and that she was hurt, guarded. He wanted to try, but doubt crept into his mind too. He was stepping into his father's shoes as the head of the Ciprielli Enterprises, and his father never had time for him or his wives. What made her think he'd be different? "There's too much between us," she said. He stepped closer. "Is there?" She straightened the cooking utensils and retreated again. Just when he thought he'd dissolved the chill between them with a warm meal, with courage and with honesty, he'd somehow said the wrong thing. His luggage was at her apartment, so they walked back, passing New Year's Eve revelers braving the weather as they trudged toward Times Square. Isabella and Mateo were quiet, but mostly because they braced against the wind and cold. When they reached the awning covering the entrance to her building, he paused. "You know, I haven't seen snow in about 5 years." It had been that long since he'd been back in the city. The team traveled all over the world but mostly stayed in warm climates or indoor arenas. He held his hand out to collect a few snowflakes. Then he turned back to Isabella. She was unique, one of a kind, just like the snow melting in his hand and in her hair. He wanted to melt the frost between them. He walked over to a bush, covered in inches of snow, and picked up a handful. "Matteo Tommaso Ciprielli, if you're thinking of throwing that at me," she was quick and her memory quicker. The kitchen at Il Basio was always steaming hot, even in the winter months, so when it snowed they'd nip outside and have a snowball fight, thankful for the relief it brought, and the fun and laughter. He playfully tossed a snowball at her and she tossed one back, before ducking behind the bush on the other side of the entryway. They lobbed a few more balls and then Mateo braved her volleys and ran past to where she hid, ready to clobber her. The doorman poked his head outside and gave them a disapproving shake of the head. Isabella giggled. Mission accomplished. What mission? I wanted to make you laugh. We'd better go inside. As she passed the doorman, she said, "Don't worry, it'll melt." They rushed through the lobby to the elevator, their boots squeaking on the marble and laughter carrying them to her floor. When they got upstairs to her apartment, the door was slightly ajar. She stopped short and gasped, panic-stricken. Chapter 9. Isabella. Isabella and Matteo stood outside her apartment door. The one good thing was the electricity had come back on. The lights blazed inside. She was wide-eyed and trembling slightly. "Do you think someone broke in?" The doorman wouldn't let anyone in without seeing their ID. It is New Year's Eve and there are lots of parties. It could have been anyone, but there's no evidence of forcible entry. He pushed the door all the way open. Her scarf had spooled on the floor between the doorframe and the threshold. "It must have caught in the door as we were leaving. I'd grabbed it, but it must have fallen off in our haste. This coat is so puffy," and she was more than slightly preoccupied with Mateo's sudden appearance. "Let's just check to be safe." He stepped inside, surveying the room. Everything looked the way they'd left it, except a few of the streamers were on the floor. It was reasonable that the tape had loosened, and they fell. She crept in behind him. He shielded her. She felt protected and thankful that he was there with her. As they passed the kitchen, she took a heavy skillet from the hook on the wall. Mateo lifted an arched eyebrow as if to ask, "Really? That's your weapon?" She shrugged, because it worked in the movies. They moved forward, checking windows and closets, but everything was locked, normal. As they moved down the hall, Isabella noticed her bedroom door was open. "Oh no. Poor Selena." "Who's poor Selena?" "My cat. She must have escaped. She'll be so scared." Isabella frantically looked under the bed and in her closet. They'd spent so much time together at the restaurant over the years, but he'd never been in her room. When he hung out at her parents' apartment when they were younger, they stayed in the family room or kitchen, watching movies or doing homework, mostly just talking. This wasn't like her room as a teen, but she was glad she'd made the bed. She was afraid to admit that having him there warmed her through with an exciting little thrill. Learning Everly lied was the final straw. She'd never liked Josh Alvarez. It was true Mateo had hurt her, but she also could have confessed her feelings instead of keeping them hidden. "Poor Selena," she called. Mateo checked the other rooms again. "From the kitchen," he said, "you have a cabinet full of cat food and treats. How do you not have human food?" She laughed. "I usually eat out or grab something on the go." She clicked her tongue, desperate to find the cat. She pulled apart her closet because poor Selena liked to find places to hide, especially in the cold. "Good news," he called from the other room. She rushed down the hall and leaped for joy. Mateo held poor Selena in one arm and scratched her head with his other hand. "Where did you find her?" "Well, she found me. I opened the bag of treats and she came running from the living room. She may have been under the couch playing with a streamer." He pointed. Isabella gathered the cat in her arms, relieved. "I don't care if you mess up the decorations or get fur on my dress. I'm so glad you're okay." She nuzzled her face into the cat's neck. "Also, consider it good luck that she let you pick her up." "She's very picky." "Picky poor Selena?" he asked and then laughed. "That's hard to believe. I figured the food would work since you named her Little Piggy in Italian." Isabella giggled. They returned to the living room. "It's a bummer my party didn't work out, but I'm glad you came." "Me too. We got to spend the evening together, just the two of us." She knew that the next day he had to face his new responsibilities and that he wasn't necessarily looking forward to it because the company came with his father's disappointment and the memory of all the difficulties they'd had in their relationship. She'd grappled with big things recently and knew it wouldn't be easy for him. Plus, she had to meet with her mother and the perfect Italian boy. But her perfect Italian boy, or rather, man, was standing right in front of her. She sighed, wanting to hold on to this moment for as long as possible. Her gaze landed on the bowl on the coffee table. Actually, we did have food here. Sort of. I guess it can be dessert. She held up one of many cellophane bags filled with silver-wrapped Hershey's chocolates. The label said Midnight Kisses. They were party favors or for people who didn't have a date. Mateo glanced at the clock on the mantel. It is almost midnight. She passed him the bag. You know what? We can see the ball rise from over there. She led him to the window. Well, we have to press against the frame, like this. She pointed. See? There it is. Well, part of it. From behind the wall of another building, a sliver of the glowing ball rose, signifying the end of one year and the beginning of the next. It was nearly time. In order for them both to see it, they had to smush together, shoulder to shoulder, hip to hip, practically overlapping. Then his arm slung over her shoulder, pulling her toward him. She softened against his chest. The countdown began, but she didn't want it to be over. Chapter 10. Mateo. The fresh blanket of snow made the city look fresh, clean. Just what Mateo wanted from the new year. But the following day he had a lot to do, well, after he visited with his mother. The company was being turned over to him and his life was about to change. Yes, he'd suddenly have a lot more money, although he already had plenty of that. It also meant facing the past. Then again, if Isabella could do it, so could he. He squeezed her closer. In with the new. She whispered, 10, 9, 8, the countdown began. The glowing ball was visible in Times Square, but all he wanted to look at was her. Her shining face. Her bright eyes. He tilted his head. She looked up at him. With each second that ticked by, they leaned in a fraction closer. Midnight kiss, she whispered as the clock struck. Their lips met. It was everything he imagined and more. It was fireworks. It was drifting confetti. It heated him up and thawed him out. She tasted sweet and spicy. He cupped the back of her head and then his hands moved to her jaw, drawing her closer still. He didn't want the kiss ever to end, and yet he knew it had to. Her mouth against his was a hello and a goodbye. She pulled back first. Happy New Year. Their eyes remained locked, searching, asking, and hoping. He inclined his head and their mouths crashed together again. It was as if he was pouring the last 15 years of his affection for her into this moment. Her hands pressed against his back as though she didn't want to let go. She didn't have to, right? He couldn't think about the possibility. So he returned the grip as they pressed their lips together and deepened the kiss. He got lost there, in her embrace, as the new year began. Mateo woke after dawn. They'd fallen asleep on the couch talking into the early hours, she, still beautiful in her gown and the snow still falling silently through the window. The cat had curled up by their feet. The light was dim, but enough to see her sweet face, peacefully asleep. He admired the slope of her nose, the brush of her lashes, and the lushness of her lips. He'd never forget their kiss as long as he lived. He wasn't looking forward to what the day would bring, but he'd found new strength and determination in Isabella. She traveled a ton for her work and likely he would too. His father was never around and he wanted more for her than he could give. He sighed, and she stirred. Good morning, Bella, he said softly. And maybe it would be. Maybe. They made a slow start, talking a bit, but both of them uncertain of this new terrain. Yes, it was snowy outside, but things were different between them now. A friendship that had fallen away years ago, and a night shared that ended in a kiss. She got up and went to the kitchen, returning minutes later with coffee. I'm sorry, I can't offer you breakfast. I'm meeting my mom for brunch soon. She took a sip. Although I love cooking, it had reminded me so much of my father I couldn't bear it. But maybe after last night, I'll be able to roll up my sleeves again and get back in the kitchen. Hope washed her features in a bright glow. Thank you for helping me. He nodded and also had something important to say. When we were in the restaurant, you said we can't go back. That there was too much between us. But I'd like to try. Can we begin again as friends? Yes, of course. She smiled. He knew that even if they couldn't have more, their friendship was enough to carry him through the coming days. I'd better go soon. I have to meet my mother too. Give her my best, she said. He knew this was goodbye, but instead he said, ciao, Bella. He leaned in and kissed her on the cheek. Chapter 11. Isabella. As the door closed behind Mateo, Isabella felt a sense of loss all over again, just like when he left to play soccer. Only this time, he was going to head an international corporation. He was so different from other guys, thoughtful, a great cook, and he knew her so well. But his life was about to change. It was clear there wasn't room in it for her when he played soccer, so there wouldn't be now. She showered and reflected on their evening. She felt so at ease, no pressure. And the kiss. As the warm water sprinkled down, she experienced the heat between them all over again. The way his mouth fit against hers felt as natural as breathing, only better. She'd imagined kissing him plenty of times when they were younger, but nothing in her teen fantasies could compare to the real thing. She felt his desire, his longing, and it was mutual. She'd wanted nothing more than that moment. It had been perfect. His gentle but demanding lips and hands. They'd imprinted upon her, and even when she turned off the shower, they hadn't washed away. But now ciao, the spell, was lifted. She got ready and stepped into the snowy new morning to meet her mother for brunch. The restaurant was one they'd frequented and had high ceilings and large windows. The dishware clinked as the guests toasted the new year. She found her mother seated with 2 extra place settings. She expected the perfect Italian boy but wondered if there was someone else joining them. They settled in, and as Isabella detailed the failed party, a familiar voice rippled over the other diners in the room. He was talking about the sauce. Mateo and his mother approached the table and moved to join them. Angela hugged Mateo's mother and then gave him a kiss on each cheek. It's been so long. Isabella unglued herself from the spot, waking from the shock, and hugged him tightly, jubilant, relieved. Then she turned to her mother and pointed at him. Mateo is the one? The perfect Italian boy you mentioned? Her mother nodded and beamed. I'm shocked, but I shouldn't be. Mateo narrowed his eyes. Let me get this straight. Mom, Mrs. Augustino, you'd set up this brunch for us to meet? The 2 women nodded. Isabella turned to him. I guess we do get a second chance. Mateo's mother and Isabella's smiled and hugged like they'd been in cahoots the whole time. Isabella, your father always said Mateo was the one. I said you need to find true love for yourself. But, Mom, you've been playing matchmaker. She shrugged. What? I'm bored. No sauce. No restaurant. No grandkids. Isabella shook her head. No, we're bringing the sauce and the restaurant back, and it's all thanks to Mateo. They sat down and Isabella and Mateo took turns describing their previous evening, the restaurant and meal specifically. They left out the midnight kisses. After they'd finished eating, the mom saw a few of their society friends and went to say hello at a nearby table. Isabella and Mateo wandered over to the window by the entrance, gazing out at the snowy cityscape. Mateo stood beside her and took her hand. She sighed. Do you think we can make this work? Work, travel, responsibilities. With Isabella, I know we can. My dad would want to see the restaurant thrive. More than anything, he'd want you to be happy. She turned to him and wrapped her arms around his neck. I am, Mateo. He leaned in and their lips met. When they pulled apart, she said, but I never asked you what you want. He looked at her. You. They closed the space between them and kissed again. Do you want more from the onlyest billionaire romance world? Check out Sophie and Teague's story in Only a Date with a Billionaire. She's a baker. He's a boxer. Their businesses are next door and incompatible, but are they? Be sure to explore Ellie Hall's sweet and swoony romance audiobook channel for more books about falling in love and happily ever afters.